So we started out with the famous question, the tactic question from Reagan in the 1980s, where he posited the question during his debates, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And they posited that to Kamala Harris right up front. And that's a very tough question because, as we know, inflation in the United States has hit a lot of people. And this is a good example of how you debate. She didn't answer the question at all. She just talked about why her side's economic program is better and how bad Trump's program was. It's an example of how these presidential debates go. We can already see some of the tactics that Kamala Harris is trying to do to liven up the debate. She's looking over and smiling at Trump, like she's listening to him and shaking her head no, like, oh, that's so ridiculous. And also, right at the beginning, she walked on all the way over to his side, even before he'd gotten fully up to the podium, to shake hands with him. And this is an alpha dog tactic, obviously, to say she's up to the task. And of course, this is all about, probably really all about Kamala Harris. Although the media is trying to tell us she's surging ahead, it's still a very close race with Trump ahead in some of these states, in some of the battleground states that we've talked about in the past. But Kamala Harris, I believe, since she was appointed the candidate, she's just only given one interview, and that was an highly edited interview with a friendly network, CNN. So a lot is riding on this. Now, Trump is making the salient point, not really clearly, but he was the one who reversed both Republican and Democratic policies, globalization policies of both of those parties that had been in place for decades. Started with the Reagan Revolution, carried on with the Clintons in the 90s by raising taxes on foreign imports to the United States that many Americans had seen as draining jobs away, and especially with China, to an adversary that has become very openly hostile to the United States. And Americans find that everything they bought is made in China. And he had the best telling point is that the Biden administration amazingly kept all of those high tariffs, those kind of anti-free trade things that Trump, a Republican of all people, who's all for free trade, supposedly, but Trump put in these tariffs and the Biden administration continued them on. So it was a big sea change in American policy. Wow. Trump is accusing her of being a Marxist. So I would say both of these candidates are kind of locked into a physical bearing. And we've seen talk about this all the way back from the Nixon and Kennedy debates, the first big televised debates in the 1960s. So we have Kamala Harris looking over at Trump, smiling, shaking her head, laughing at what she wants you to think are ridiculous answers. Trump is not really reacting much to Kamala Harris at all, but I think he's maybe making the mistake. He's looking down and kind of almost like responding to the interviewer rather than responding to people at large and the public. And you see Kamala Harris is playing into the camera more, because when you're in these debates, you don't want to, you realize you're not just talking to the reporter, you're making a little speech out to the public. Yeah, Trump is showing is sort of a petrified glance here, straight ahead, not looking at her. It's easy when you get in these public circumstances to get locked into physical bearing, and I don't know. I think he should loosen up just a little bit. Harris is. Certainly at this point, we're going to say she's a lot looser in her presentation. Now, what all of this means, it's long been said in American politics, by the people who lose the presidential elections, that Americans just pick the candidates not based on their policies or how good they are, but on how they present themselves in public. So will be a certain a segment of commentators that will hone in on this this physical aspect of the debate. So Kamala Harris is making the most of this issue about abortion. See, the Republicans, Trump, his Supreme Court picks got the federal protection for abortion in the United States overturned. It doesn't mean they're illegal, but a lot of states, it means the states can make their own laws with whatever they want to do. Some have been super, super strict with it, and the voters have punished Republicans in other elections since that overturning of Roe v. Wade, where these abortion restrictions are being put in, and even things like in vitro fertilization. That's the old test tube baby things, which is a great thing for infertile couples, but some religious people don't like it, and those bans are being brought up as well. So this is a tough issue for Republicans here, and a lot of this, it does feel like Kamala Harris is really schooling Trump. Now, whether you believe in what she's saying or not, the physiognomy, the way she's looking at him, the emphatic nature in his voice does contrast with Trump kind of looking down with his scowl and not really responding to her. Yeah, so Kamala Harris is bringing up this issue of the border control bill. You see, the Biden administration kind of gave in. They had a very open border, an unprecedented amount of illegal aliens pouring into the United States, and there was so much public pressure. They gave in. They almost kind of went over to the Trump side. A lot of people supported this bill to tighten up the border, to reverse the Biden policies. But Trump, in a seemingly very cynical way, had the Republicans vote it down, so Biden's side couldn't claim victory on this issue and take away a big issue for the Republicans. Let's see how Trump responds. Well, I could say Kamala Harris has the talking points down, and she's quite good so far in sort of taking the issues to Trump. You see, this is it'll be interesting. I mean, I think Kamala Harris can overdo it with her turning and smiling and listening. But Trump certainly needs to respond a little bit more to her and loosen up a little bit. With all of these very high-profile, important issues, we talk about the inflation and abortion, this sort of thing so far, and immigration, illegal immigration. It seems reductive to reduce it to something like mere perception. But I would remind you that, in the 80s, we had the situation where the media and the Democrats portrayed someone as like Reagan in 1980 as an insane person, as a crazy person who was going to get us into a war with Russia. We shouldn't say Russia's bad. We shouldn't say they're an authoritarian state. We shouldn't say they're evil. When Reagan was at the debates, he seemed quite reasonable, and even the policies of Carter and him seemed not so far apart. So we have this sort of syndrome that happens within the debates, that if one side says so much about one candidate, that candidate can come on a debate and show they seem quite reasonable. And thus far, I would say Kamala is seeming pretty reasonable, and Trump is seeming pretty stiff and maybe jingoistic in some of the things he said. Yeah, I mean, I try to be nonpartisan, but I'm not trying to talk down Trump, but I think we see a performance diversion here. There's a little response right there from Trump. He should be doing more of that. Loosen up a little bit. Look up some. She seems. She's presenting like, she's a reasonable person. Now she's getting into these, the former disgruntled employees of Trump, of which there are many. And clearly, this is a preset spiel that they've got Harris to memorize, but it's very good, and this is something that will dig into to Trump's sense of self. Let's see how he responds. Well, he has a nice response. I don't know if people understand this, but Trump's response to that is Trump says he fired people who failed or failed him, but they never fired anybody, like all the people who botched the U.S. Withdrawal from Afghanistan that resulted in so many deaths and turned the country back over to the Taliban. Again, Trump needs to look up and you see how I'm talking to you? I'm pretending to talk to you out there in YouTube land. I'm looking at you. Trump is responding down to the reporter. He needs to say stuff out to you like I'm talking to you right now. And I'm standing in spirit at your elbow. That's a Charles Dickens line from Christmas Carol. See, I don't mind an emphatic, kind of mean-sounding guy like Trump is right now, or how he is sometime. But I think that if you've worked in big business with big ego persons, you get used to that, and you feel you understand that kind of a person. I don't think most Americans or most people in general will sympathize with that sort of presentation of his character. See, this is good preparation. Trump had the spiel about crime. Trump always has to be careful not to exaggerate. There are good points about the way Biden administration has handled immigration and flip-flopped on it. But a lot of the claims, when Trump says them, they're probably over the top, probably not true. It's always been an Achilles heel of his. And here Trump, I'm just listening to Kamala at the same time, but she's come back with obviously another great preset thing where she's talking about, oh, that's rich coming from a guy who's been prosecuted for this and that and the other. That's a difficult thing to refute. Certainly some of those prosecutions are fishy, but certainly Trump is very undisciplined and invites these sort of issues to him. Let's see how he's responding. But that was a good response from Kamala Harris. It shows good preparation on her side. Again, I'm telling you, they're going to talk about him looking down like that. You see how wrinkly and the darkness under his brows and the scowl on his face. Certainly, I won't be the only one who will reference back to the Nixon-Kennedy debate in 1960. I believe that was the first televised debate. It's all online. They made a big deal of the time. Like Nixon, he had a flu, and I think he wouldn't put on any makeup. You should at least put on like a foundation so you're not shiny. And he had like a 5 o'clock shadow, and he kind of talked down like this, exactly like Trump did, responding directly to the interviewer as he was talking to the interviewer, as opposed to giving a speech. Kennedy was the opposite. He looked good, stood up straight, was very vigorous, and he talked through the camera out to the people. This is a mistake Trump is making right now, unfortunately for him. Kamala's back. They're giving Trump a little time to push in here with a response, talking about he took a bullet to the head because of what Kamala Harris, their side, did, talking about he's a threat to democracy. It's probably true all around. He is certainly at some... he hasn't shown he's not a threat to democracy, and I definitely think that all that rhetoric in the press continually certainly would cause people to take action, as we saw. And now we're talking about energy independence for the United States. For many, many decades, the bugaboo in American politics is that we have to get all our oil from unfriendly, autocratic countries overseas. and we're dependent on that, and we got to spend lots of money to keep the trade lanes open, not only for us but for our trading partners, uh, who buy our debt. So we're protecting the seas for China. We're protecting the seas for Japan in the past. Uh, one of the claims to fame on the Trump administration is under his administration, they opened up fracking, which is putting high pressure water down into the coal veins, and that way you can pressure out extra oil, and through that, America amazingly became energy independent. I'm sure it wasn't only him, but that was one of their claim to fame. And Kamala's saying she was never against fracking either. Very often, things like climate change were linked to uh, ending coal mining and fracking and this sort of thing. And this is one of the reasons why the climate change has become such a politicized thing in America, because people see it. If you bring up and say, I believe in climate change, people believe, oh, that means you want to shut down more jobs in coal mining areas, in depressed areas of the country. That's an unfortunate linkage of those two things. Let's see what Trump's saying. Trump is not saying what he's for. He's just saying how bad she is and refuting all the stuff she's saying. And again, this is not where you want to be. You don't want to be in a position where you are responding to the other person only. I remember that so vividly in the debates in the 1980s and even into the 1990s, when the Republicans were supreme, both in the debates and in the political cycles. Very much the Democrats were stuck into just responding to what the Republicans were saying. That allowed the Republicans to be the leaders of policies and the Democrats just to be the naysayers and saying this is going to be disaster. And we have certainly this here where it seems like Kamala is setting the stage for what the policy is, and Trump is saying, well, that's terrible, she's terrible, or that's a lie. And I'll say quite clumsily, too, Trump's response is rambling. See, I'm looking at this in the same way that I would look at when I watch sports games. Whoever has the ball, I'm kind of looking at their perspective and sort of rooting for them in that moment. And in that way, it allows me to say what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong. And Trump looks absolutely dejected now. He's not on the right track. They're going to say the same thing. They're going to refer to the Nixon-Kennedy debate, where Nixon was primarily responding to the interviewer, and Kennedy was responding and giving a speech out through the television. That's exactly what's happening. Okay, I just made an exaggerated thumbnail like they all make on these crazy YouTube videos these days. And I guess if what I'm really reacting to is how poorly Trump has done so far. I think you might wonder, if you're a foreigner, you might wonder, just as I know many foreigners believe, after the election of George W. Bush and of Trump the first time, they're astonished because they heard one message from the media, the international media, the predominant media in the United States almost openly supports the Democratic candidate. And they portray the Republicans as crazy, insane, incompetent, criminal people. And I think even within the United States, people who would vote for Trump, people do see how odious many of the things he says have been, or sometimes how he's not really a politician. He's kind of clumsy in explaining some of these points. But a lot of these people feel like there is a need to shut down immigration, to put tariffs on Chinese goods, to ban abortion. That's a long-standing issue. And they're willing to put up with a person like Trump, who is, in his personal conduct, very messy. You know, in the past, all the Republicans tried to pretend they were angelic angels in their personal life. How amazing that a person like Trump could come to preeminence in the Republican Party. See, Trump is showing temper. The Democrats have got to be cheering at this point. You see, this is despite talking about polarization in the United States, because something like this is not going to, it's not going to have any of the hardcore supporters on the left or the right change positions, but it's always the moderate middle. This is the Clinton people in the 90s found this concept to take away the presidency from the Republicans who were preeminent for so long. They found different classes of voters who were the moderate middle, the soccer moms, the middle class moms who would be open to some kinder, gentler conservatism in someone like Bill Clinton. And so the same thing, despite the constant talk of polarization, I'm positive will play out here in the United States in this election. That moderate middle is going to swing the election. And if one side seems too dangerous or temper-laden, or if one side, like the Harris side, seems too liberal or incompetent, that is going to swing the election. And so far, the challenge for Harris is to show she's not a giggling nincompoop like she has been in some of her past early on interviews and speeches early on when she was vice president. See, Trump is showing a lot of temper now. He's brought up the Hungarian strongman Orban. They're loving it. Saying Biden hates Kamala Harris. They got under Trump's skin. Well, what we can say, there's some of these responses by Trump that, let's face it, sound unhinged. And this is the difference that a candidate makes. Let's face it, the people voted for Biden, and in the debate, Trump destroyed him because Biden was clearly doesn't have the mental acuity for one reason or another to debate or do anything anymore. And a lot of people knew that for a long time, despite what the media said. So Kamala Harris, you know, even at the time, people were saying, wow, how unsuitable she would be, because they saw all the past videos of the world of her and her comportment during those videos, the way she expressed herself. She seemed to be a lightweight, but she was sort of appointed as the new candidate. And you see how different this debate is from the one against Biden, how during that one, Trump spoke out to the audience, to the people out in the TV land, and how he was relaxed. And it was Biden was the one who showed temper and was befuddled and did not speak in a clear, concise way. So now we're talking about Hamas and the war in Israel. Trump's response here about what's going to happen in Israel, he has the basis of an issue in that the international order has broken down wildly during Biden's administration. And Trump could make a case that is the case in so many areas of the world. But that message is lost in his very clumsy style of speaking and wild exaggeration. Such Israel is not going to exist in 2 more years if Harris is elected, and other eye-rolling things. Saying that Camilla hates Israel, You could point to parts about how the administration has distanced themselves from Israel over this situation, and that is has been in the past one of the red lines of U.S. politics. You always have to support Israel no matter what, but you can't exaggerate it too much like Trump is doing. Oh, here we go. See, they're already ready. The quotes: Trump's baseless claim that they're eating the pets. See, it's not even over, and the big media outlets are already seizing on these great sound bites. In this era of clickbait, you got to watch out for saying stuff like that. See, Trump is making a good point now about funding of the Ukrainian war. You know, it's the issue we've talked about in the past. Some of the richest countries in the world over there, and those countries years ago agreed to increase their GDP spending for defense to, I think, 2.75. I'm not sure, something like that. None of them have done that. All those countries have lavish social systems. You probably met Europeans who sniff down their nose at you because you don't have free health care in the United States. So Trump was insisting they pay for their own defense against Russia and the Ukraine, and at least increase their GDP to 2.75. Now you see how well I explained that point to you, and Trump's point, way he's explaining it, is very clumsy, and again, it's tinged with the temper that Harris has very skillfully got him on that temper track so far in the debate. And here he is, emphatically hunched shoulders, talking towards the interviewer, even mentioning the interviewer by name. A very competent response from Harris. I think you could take issue with some of these points if you're for not being engaged in foreign wars, which a lot of the media has inculcated a lot of Americans about, especially during the time of George W. Bush earlier in this century, where we had these two kind of elective wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then later, the next president who came in, Obama, had another elective war, the most elective of all in Libya. Those are cases that can be made, but it doesn't seem like Trump is the person who's able to make that case. At least not in this debate in Harris. See, they're giving Trump some extra time to respond. I think this is the second time they've done so. At this point, I'm not sure if that's a wise move on Trump's side to do that. You can see how Trump is not even looking you in the eye, he's looking down. And again, some of these points are probably true. Certainly, the Biden administration, botched the situation in the Ukraine from the beginning, and we've seen that all around the world, where we have China feels okay to saber rattle, even down other countries like Venezuela saying, "Hey, if it's a free for all during this administration, maybe we'll invade other countries as well." But again, Trump's not very good in his response. And I would also clarify at the end point, it is true the U.S. does have to be engaged and does have to make sure that other countries are not running roughshod. The U.S. has all these bases all around the world with our soldiers stationed in all around the world, probably in your country. And they run things both that way and mainly through money. And if the U.S. doesn't make sure that they create the world outside of its borders that is advantageous to it, there may be a world that comes to pass which may not be in the United States' best interest. I'm not, and I know people are saying it's now a multipolar world. I don't think that's the case at all, and we've seen how just a little slip up from an administration within 4 years can cause all this international order to go awry. But uh, I don't think, when you look into the internal economics and demographics of all these countries that are acting up right now, uh, they don't have a long term. They don't have a long term path during which they're going to really make strides, probably. And the U.S. is probably going to end up on top unless we turn away into isolationism, and that would be a mistake. Well, Harris is made the case that Trump had a bad deal in Afghanistan because he negotiated with the Taliban. But the reality is the Afghanistan thing fell apart because the Biden administration changed the policy and decided they wanted to take advantage of it by getting out early, and they gave the whole country back to the Taliban. And as for negotiating with the Taliban, that's really the goal of all diplomacy. It doesn't matter, like in public, if the U.S. says we're not going to negotiate with you. There's always back channels where they're talking to. And especially, you'd say like Al Qaeda or Taliban, you have these weird states that are different than the international nation state, and we'd rather get these groups nailed down to say this is our territory. We work within the world order. We go to negotiations. So I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing that they got somebody from the Taliban to sit down under international auspices to negotiate. You see, they're talking about race now, and Harris has a very well prepared response on this, a list of all of these real or perceived racial slights and things that Trump has been engaged with, and she's doing it in a real confident, matter-of-fact way. It's not like an attack for her. She's just like saying, remember this thing, remember that thing. She's very well prepared, and Trump is, I think at this point, again, the Democrats must be quite pleased with themselves. This was a great test of Harris, who they were so unconfident with. She only had given one interview since being appointed as the candidate. Not a single vote cast for her. The primaries were finished after she became the candidate. Trump is trying to give some nuance to some of these claims about how racist he is supposed to be. Again, all of his responses have been responses. And on a televised debate, in the presidential debate on the American stage, you don't respond. Just give your own speech right out to the camera about what you're about and sidestep going into these swamps of accusations or responding to the other candidate. So both of these candidates are summing up. Trump just kind of summed up some of the issues with immigration and inflation. And now we have Kamala Harris with her soundbite, a good one. She offers a new generation. And she said, I'm not Biden and I'm not Trump. I appreciate that they're allowing the candidates to stray a bit from the supposedly ironclad rules of this debate to respond. But I suspect it's not a good thing for the Trump side. See, she's responding to him, and he kind of is leaning to the side with his eyes closed. He's certainly lost the body posture part of the debate, if not all of it. I also have to wonder, is everybody on Ozempic now? I don't think it's normal for grown-up people like Harris, and even when Trump lifts his head up, I think everybody's on that because you have this kind of sunken cheek thing, or a face that's a little too thin for modern day humans in this day and age, and of their wealth. People tend to be rounder faced and bloated, but suddenly we see a whole era of bony faced people overnight, and I bet that's from these new diet drugs. We need to put this debate out of its misery, and I maybe call it for Harris. Uh, I'm a big NFL guy. I watch a lot of games, and I don't have any favorite teams. It's whoever has the ball, or maybe sometime whoever's on the defense. I'm interested in analyzing and thinking about what they're doing, how they can do better, and it's sort of the same thing in politics. I you know, when Trump's speaking, I want to analyze, is he doing good or bad? When Harris is speaking, I want to analyze whether she's doing good or bad, and how the whole thing's working out. I mean, I really, there's some things I'm liberal about, and there's some things I'm conservative about, like most people. But I try to separate that and be sort of nonpartisan when I'm looking at this debate and all the political things that I cover. But I think we can't escape the situation that Harris is certainly perhaps even overwhelmed Trump at this point. And I really think probably this election was the Republicans to lose, because there were many issues that resonated with the public that they split with the administration on, and the Biden administration had many failures and many problems during its time in power, whether it was their fault entirely or not. And Biden himself, obviously not quite all there. It's unfortunate, maybe, if you're on the Republican side, to say we have a candidate that was unable to capitalize on this situation. In the United States, the media had leveled so much cover onto the public to tell them that, what is this? I'm ready to put this debate out of its misery. Okay, we're returning in 24 seconds. See, the next step is for both sides to have people, that their allies, come out and talk to the media and say, my side won the debate. All the Trump people say, I won the debate, and all the people, Harris, say, I won the debate. And probably, depending on which side you agree with anyway, in the polarized political landscape, that's who you might believe will have won the debate. But I think it's pretty apparent if you step back and take a neutral stance, if you can. Harris did a fine job, and Trump probably will be considered a disastrous performance. You see, these are the ending statements. And as I said in a previous video, it seemed to me that even during the convention, Harris was able to somehow recompose herself as not an incumbent. And in the way she was at the very last minute brought in as the candidate, it allowed her to separate herself from some of the problems of the administration that she was a part of. And she certainly seems like that here. And Trump, because he was a previous president, it almost seems like he's the incumbent, because Trump is a known quantity. So when people are saying it's all going to be disastrous this time if Trump's reelected, that can be a little hyperbolic, because we've already seen what he's like as president. And there is some chaos there. But because of that, because of how Harris was brought in at the last second, after the whole primary political cycle was over and all the votes were cast, and how Trump is a previous president, and we've seen how he's a president, it seems like Trump is the incumbent and Harris is the new voice. It's quite a political trick to do that. That was painful and hilarious, depending on which side you're on. Wow. And I'm interested to see if other people agree with me, but from where I'm sitting, I would say Harris just swept the floor with Trump.